I've had a few bar owners 1 minute before the event starts change their mind and like charge me like double.
So you just pay for that out of pocket?
Some of them, yeah. And then last minute they'll be like, listen, like, the opportunity cost of tonight is too high. And I was like, that just ruined my entire night. Because now I'm just thinking about how much money I lost.
Andrew Yeung. He throws some of the biggest tech events and parties in New York City. His events have been featured on Bloomberg, Morning Brew, and Jason Calacanis' This Week in Startups. He has organized over 100 events in 5 different cities, from throwing dinner parties for friends to now running 1,000-person plus events. Andrew is taking over the New York tech scene.
You have a moment like that for events where you were just like, this is going to be a thing for me. Like, this is going to be part of like the legacy. Like, people are going to know me for doing events.
The Williamsburg Hotel. And I did 4 events there over summer. I filled the entire rooftop. There's like a water tower in the top
Yeah,
where
I
you
know-
can go
I
up
know
there
what
and you
you're
can
talking about.
watch. And I went up there during my event and I saw these people like walking around, meeting new people, having energizing conversation, and everyone had a smile on their face. And I was like, I got to like play a role in doing that. That was really cool.
You know what? Actually, let's touch on that quickly. The Sampar and Sahil Bloom event. What was even like your experience like working with them? How was it? Before we get into the video, YouTube analytics say that 90% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you want to see even bigger guests, better conversations, please subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast. And with that, onto the video. Welcome to the Callum Johnson Show. On today's episode, we have Andrew Yeung. Andrew, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Pleasure.
Nice. We like to go with the rolling intro.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So in my mind, you can tell me what you think of this. In my mind, you're like the king of New York City tech events. That's the title I've given you. But why don't we start by just like introduce yourself to the audience, like what you do, what you've been building, all that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So starting with like my career background, I'm a tech operator. So currently a product lead at Google. Before that, I worked at Facebook or Meta. And then before that, I worked at like a telco company. I'm pretty new to New York, so I've been here for about 2 years. And what I like to usually share in my intro is that I've lived in 5 different countries. So spent about 20 years in Asia, born in Hong Kong, I'm Cantonese, moved to Taipei, and then moved to Shanghai, moved to Toronto. And then in 2020, moved to New York City, which is how I started my community building, my party throwing journey in the middle of COVID. And, I do the events. Out of the events, I also run like a deal flow newsletter. I coach job seekers. I advise some startups. I run a job board. So think of it as, I have these events where a lot of people go to, and then coming out of that, I have a few sort of mechanisms to help the various groups in the, in the picture, help them sort of hire, recruit, do better in business, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And just to be like, to the scale of it, I would say like if you work in tech in New York, you've most likely been to one of your events at this point. This episode is brought to you by Free Agency. If you want to take your career to the next level, Free Agency is a company that you should check out. They manage and represent talent in the tech industry, and they provide you with a dedicated talent agent to help you find, engage, and win top of market roles that will maximize your earning potential. No more leaving money on the table. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. Anyway, back to the show. Like I feel like people I've spoken to that I've like, even if I've mentioned that I'm doing this episode, they're like, oh yeah, like I know that guy.
Cool.
Like, yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
How many events would you even say, like, if you were going to do it like by a week or by a month, like how many do you even do?
Yeah. The total number is over 100 in the last 2 years. And this includes like the small dinners, like the 12, 8-person dinners. Every week, I'll probably do like one a week, one every 2 weeks consistently. And then in the summer, it really ramps up. Because you got nice weather, you got rooftops. And so I'm always trying to find a reason to do an event because the venues are like, there are more venues available.
Yeah.
So about on average, I would say about like one a week.
Okay, nice. And I even liked in the intro, you kind of, you've just been in a lot of different places. Like you've done a lot of different things. But I want to hone in on the events. Like what, you said you started during COVID, right? What prompted it? Was it like, and in COVID, it must have been like virtual events, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've never done a virtual event, I don't think.
Really? Okay.
I'm all about like IRL. So like virtual, like video. I'm not a huge fan of video calls. It doesn't feel as real.
Mm.
So I'm so glad we did this in person. It's just a way different energy. But for me, it's like I've always wanted to live in New York City, and I've lived in so many different cities in my life, and each time I'm like, what's like a doper city? And like every time it sort of points to like New York City, like one of the dopest cities in the world. Timing wise, it just ended up being strange that I moved during COVID, but that was when like my job pivot happened, and it just sort of made sense then. So for me, when I finally got into New York in August 2020, I was like, I'm here to like meet people. I'm here to like build like a whole new like social circle. I didn't really know that many people at the time, and so what I started doing was making friends online. I was new to Twitter back then, so I used Twitter. I used like Fishbowl, if you heard of Fishbowl.
Yeah.
For consultants and stuff. I used Blind, LinkedIn, and I was like, how do I just build my network from online? And at that time it was COVID, so I did like Central Park meetups and dinners outdoors and stuff. So I started bringing people from like the virtual world to the IRL world, and then from there it sort of like scaled into like happy hours and then into like big rooftop things and big parties.
Yeah. You remember like like the first event that had like, I don't even know, like over like 50 people, like 100 people. You remember that?
Yeah, I think I used to like rent out a portion of the bar called Kingston Hall.
Okay.
It was in East Village, and like it's a free venue, so for anyone watching, it's probably still free. You can host like 50 to 100 people for free, and I would just invite people from like Fishbowl. I would put a form on Fishbowl, and I was like, who who wants to meet friends? Who just moved to the city and wants to like make new friends? And then I would sort of like try to curate a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was the first one. The first bar that I would do consistently, over 50 people.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like an interesting way to get into the space because even obviously for me, like I grew up in London from the UK. When I moved to the States, I was initially in Jersey because my mum lives in Jersey. And then about 18 months ago, just over 18 months ago, I moved into New York, and I have the same thing as you. I'm in this massive city. Like how do I meet people? But I was like, I'm just trying to meet like a few guys and like form a group or something. I'm not like, I'm going to do like events. So like in your mind, what kind of took it from, I just want to make like a friends group or just know like a few people in the city to like, I'm going to be hosting these like baller ass events and stuff.
Yeah, it's a really good point. A really good question. I don't think anyone has asked me that before. It's mostly like, the original intention was to make a few friends and have my circle. But then I kept meeting like cooler and cooler people, interesting people. And every time you meet, and you probably have this like tendency as well, but every time you meet someone really interesting, you sort of think in the back of your head, like, who can I connect them to? Sort of bring that relationship to a new level. Or like the most tangible example, if you meet a founder in a space that's fundraising, and then you meet like an investor in that exact same space, like you have an itch to like just connect them, right? And so that's what I did, and it just kept scaling, and it got bigger and bigger. And my intention was never to, like have like 1,000-person party. It was meet some people, meet interesting people, and that was like sort of my number one value when I moved here: meet interesting people, and then it just sort of like snowballed from there.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a natural talent, because at least for me, and maybe it's just because I don't see things in like from the perspective of someone that does events. When I see someone that I'm like, oh, I really get on with this person, it is definitely not within my like first 5 thoughts, like who could I connect this person to? I feel like in my mind I'd be like, oh, that person's like cool, we should like hang out again or something like that, or like now that obviously I do a podcast, I'm like, oh, would they be like interesting to get on the pod kind of thing?
Right.
I actually think being a connector is a skill, and a really powerful skill, because, and I'll see it even in this podcast, a lot of people get opportunities through their network. So obviously we speak with like a ton of entrepreneurs, like founders. A lot of the ways they found, or even they met their co-founder, someone like introduced them, like it was a connection, or the way that they found like their lead investor or their first investor, it was a connection. So the role that you play as a connector is actually a crucial one.
Right. Yeah, I guess I sort of see it as um, I'm just like always trying to problem solve. And
Mm,
this might be it's a blessing and a curse because when I meet someone, I'm immediately always like one, I want to get to know you, and like two, what are your goals, and like what are
mm,
you trying to accomplish? And then once you share those goals with me, I'm like, I want to connect you to this person who's
mm,
done it before or who can help you get there. And
mm,
I don't know, that's always like in the back of my mind. There's an itch. I'm always trying to get to like the deep stuff, which is
mm,
like, what are your dreams? Because we all moved to New York for a reason, and it's probably to accomplish your dreams.
mm,
And that's like the best thing to sort of talk about. It's the most energizing type of conversation you can have is like, what are your dreams and ambitions?
mm. So you would say, so I'm always trying to think, I'm like, what is the feeling? Like, what is
Yeah.
the motivation? Um, you would say just helping someone achieve something that they've always wanted to do. That's like just almost like scratches an itch. Like it's just satisfying being able to do that. Like, what do you think motivates you having that thought?
Yeah, I think I think it's probably an element of that. When I first started my job at Facebook, there were like a ton of people trying to break into like Fang or like big tech, and for like 3 4 months, I opened up my calendar to literally anyone who wanted coaching, and
Mm,
I loved like that coaching thing. I loved like helping people like revamp their resumes, prep for interviews. Like I love that interview thing.
mm,
And so I think yeah, it's an innate tendency to sort of help people become like the best version of themselves and like elevate their performance. And like my newsletters, it's probably still this way, but it started off as like helping you accelerate your growth and performance.
mm,
And so I think it's always just been sort of an innate thing.
mm. You know what's interesting? I think I know in my story, I know in the story of people that we've had on the pod and people that I've just spoken to in life, anyone that's achieved something big or that was special to them, there was always usually one person that like believed first.
Mm,
There's always one person that gave them like the first shot. Before, a lot of the times as well, it was before they were really ready. I know I've had that. Like I've had
interesting.
certain
Yeah.
certain guests say yes, and then as soon as they say yes, you're like, fuck. You're like, now I actually need to be like ready to interview this guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting
if you were
observation.
if
Yeah.
you were gonna like reflect on your own
Yeah.
journey, who's someone that you think like that person really helped me and like pushed me forward? Um, who is that person for you?
Yeah. This guy immediately comes to mind, but he was my very first mentor. Um, so when I moved to Canada, I didn't really know anyone, but I had sort of one like distant family friend. His name is Greg Mack. Giving him a shout out. He was the one that taught me how to build like my first resume, and he's always been like a really high performer, super accomplished. When I was a student, like he was like a really dope management consultant, worked at Google, worked at Snap, and at the time, and still to this day, I'm like, wow, that's incredible. It's an
Mm,
incredible career journey. And he would always carve out so much time for me. And like I think back then I was kind of like a piece of shit. Like I had no discipline. I wasn't very put together, wasn't very buttoned up, and I was just like I like to play, and I was sort of like not the best like teenager. But he like really invested a lot of time in me
mm,
and taught me how to interview, gave me a ton of opportunities. And that was like the first time I saw, well, not the first time, but that was like a really significant time in which I saw someone being very kind and very generous. And to this day, he still does stuff like that. Like when COVID
mm,
hit and, there were like the mass layoffs, everyone was like losing their job. And he opened up his calendar for everyone on LinkedIn and coached
mm,
over 100 people in a span of like, a few months.
mm,
And he's just like a giver, a pure giver. He's kind, he's generous. And I think that is just really inspiring.
mm,
And that's, I think, in the back of my head and probably proactively as well, that's someone that I want to emulate. He's a
mhm,
very brilliant, kind human being.
mm. Oh, that's a good thing to strive for. That's a good thing to strive for. Okay, cool. So, you start doing the events. I love talking to people about this moment. Um, which is like the moment where it goes from like, okay, maybe I've done like a few like cool events and people have shown up and uh actually no, before I get into that,
Yeah.
I know like when I put out my podcast, right? you have all of these like doubts and like insecurities before you ever do shit.
Right.
And like one of the things for me, I was like, will anyone listen to this thing? Like, will I put it out and it's like 3 listeners, one is my mom, the other's like my dad, and then like some random guy from like Twitter. I always like to hear these stories because I feel like it's inspiring for people that they maybe have something that they're striving for, but they have all this doubt along that journey. When you were starting out, what were some of like the like insecurities or like doubts that you had about whether this was even something that you could do and like it would have traction and people would care about it?
Damn, such good questions. Really good questions. So when I didn't really have those doubts when I first started, because when I first started doing events, it was very small, 8 to 12 people, and very curated. So I sort of knew like most of the people would show up. It wasn't like, is anyone even going to come? I had like sort of pre-wired and I had set expectations. I'm like, come, this person will be there. So I think I'd run it pretty well. When they started getting a little bit bigger, and at that time I was trying to build trust with like hospitality leaders, because at one point when I was like scaling to like, let's say from 50-person events to like 200, the venues were like a pain in the butt. Like that whole process is incredibly annoying. You have to put your card down, you lose a bunch of money most of the time. I was like, how do I build trust with those guys so that I can just automate that part of the process? And for them, I was like, is anyone even going to show up at your event? And I'm like, I need a 1,000 person venue. And they didn't know who I was. And at that point I was like the guy who had done a few dinners. So that was a huge thing. I was like, are people going to show up? And when I first started doing events, I think it was like a 30 to 40% attendance rate. I tweeted about this, but if 1,000 people RSVP'd, like 300 or 400 would show up. Maybe that was a COVID thing. And over time that has increased. Now it's about 80%, which is why there are lines, and I really need to manage that. But to sort of like sum up, yeah, it was, are people even going to show up? And if you know, if not, why aren't they? And you starting to explore that a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I was going to mention before I said that question, which was like, and I remember it vividly with this podcast. I think it was the 4th episode I recorded, and I enjoyed all of the first few ones, but like the first 2 or 3, you're just kind of like nervous and like just trying to bring your mind to the fact that you're actually doing this. And then it was the 4th one, and I remember the guest, Ruben Harris. And it was like, I was so like present in the conversation and our energies just matched. And I was like, it was like I was sold. I was like, okay, this is it. Like I'm doing this shit. Like 100, I'm doing like hundreds of this. You have a moment like that for events where I don't know, maybe you were like in an event, maybe it was like reflecting after, maybe it was someone that you met from doing an event where you were just like, it went from, I'm just doing like dinners and just trying to meet cool people in New York, to this is going to be a thing for me. Like this is going to be part of like the legacy. Like people are going to know me for doing events.
Right. Yeah. So I think like, you know, I don't think events are like the end state for me. Yeah. And it's probably, you know, podcasting might be or it might not be the end state for you.
Yeah.
I think events is just like the starting point. I don't really know what's next, but I do want it to transform and evolve. But there are a few moments that sort of gave me the feeling that you're talking about, which is like one of them was the Williamsburg Hotel. Have you been to one of those events before? It was during the summer.
I've been to the Williamsburg Hotel, but I don't think I went to your one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the rooftop is beautiful,
yeah,
and the sunset there is beautiful. And I did four events there over summer. I filled the entire rooftop, and there's like a water tower in the top where you can go up there and you can watch. And I went up there during my event, and I saw these people like walking around, meeting new people, you know, having energizing conversation, and everyone had a smile on their face.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to like play a role in doing that. That was really cool.
Like the Great Gatsby or some shit.
Huh?
Have you watched the Great Gatsby?
I have.
Yeah, that's kind of what that would remind me of.
Yeah, a little bit. Like you're watching the product you've created.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool, and that's why I'm sort of interested in the hospitality angle of all this as well. But then afterwards, like people DM me and they were like, I met my co-founder, I met my first investor, um, I met a girl, and
Mm,
I was like, damn, that's cool. That's like
mm,
a lot of power, not in the sort of like the negative sense, but more so in like you have the power to influence people in a positive way by creating a space for them to connect and build community. And that was when I was like, I have to keep doing this. That's like,
mm.
um, that's my mission. I have to keep doing that so people have that space.
Yeah. No, I always think it's always the impact on others that I think keeps you doing it, because I know for podcasting it's probably even more for events. There's so much work that goes into it that no one will ever see, and it's not really about removing the work. Like you don't really do that. It's like you just have to make the work worth it. And I
Mm.
think
Yeah.
moments like that, when you see the impact on other people, is what makes it worth it. Um, I'm kind of curious for you to like dive into the behind the scenes,
Mm.
like, and maybe you can even talk about it comparing what it was like in the beginning to what it's like now. Like when you do one of these large events, like 100 people plus, or like 1,000, like what has to happen before that up until the moment when you're like there and like greeting people at the front? Like what is everything that's happening behind the scenes? Like what is even the timeline? Like how long would that take to do a
Yeah.
1,000 person event?
Yeah. The normal sort of like lead time, I'll use that word, is probably 2 to 3 weeks.
Hmm.
But I've done like an 800 person party in like 2 days. I was in San Francisco, and my buddy Cliff was like, "You should throw a party." And it was Wednesday, and he's like, "You should throw one on Friday." And I was like, "Okay, let's try it. Why not?" That's the fastest one I've done. But
How'd that go?
it was all right. It was fine. People showed up. It was good diversity, but people were like, and I reflected on this. People were like, "What's the point of this party?"
Hmm.
Um, because I didn't know San Francisco, and like I don't think anyone there knew me as well. It was like my second event there, but it was still fun for us. Got to meet a lot of friends, and I think part of like uh, traveling is more fun when you like do an event because it's a warm way to sort of meet people. But going back to like behind the scenes, I think about events from like you know, there's four different elements of an event. The first one is like the context and like the why, like why are you bringing people together? It's like the intention, and it could be to connect investors and founders. It can be just for fun, but that has to be really clear in how you communicate and go to market when you create the event. The second thing is the people, and this is not in order of importance. If it was, I would put people up top. So the people curation, like who
Yeah.
are you inviting and why are they going to be there, and also like more importantly, like how do you reach them? Like the distribution is huge. Most people are like, I want these people to come to my event, but they have no way of like marketing to those people. The third one is the venue, and that matters a lot because it sets like the energy of like the event. And then the last one is the programming. So the programming is like what's even going on at the event. I don't really have much programming. I have volunteers. You might have noticed that go around and like speak with people, and it's normally
Mm.
like 10% of the attendees are volunteers. But like what's going on? Do you have a musician? And that sort of ties into the first component, which is like why are we here?
Mm.
So if you have those four things in mind, you can very quickly automate. That's the playbook to do an event, and you just master each one of those components, and that's how you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. The one thing, and not to gas you up too much, but like I've gone to like a bunch of networking events in the city, and I've always really enjoyed your ones. Um, and I think it's because it feels curated. The one that I also think it feels like there's like a diversity of people. It's not all just the same guy, or like
Yeah.
everyone's working in the same industry, which you definitely get at some events. Um, and like even just listening to you describe it, you know, like you're really deep in it. Like you know like the details and like everything that you're putting together. Like the experience isn't happening by accident. I'm curious, like who do you look at in the space? Um, like who do you like look at in the space and you just like admire it? Like you're like that person does like a really good job. Um,
Yeah, there's a whole list of people. Um, I would say the one person that has been probably the most influential in terms of how I run my events is Nick Gray.
Mm-hmm.
You know Nick Gray?
Yeah,
Heard of him on Twitter?
he released a book, right?
Yeah, his book is
Yeah.
it's called The 2 Hour Cocktail Party,
Okay.
and it's literally a guidebook on how to like run a party. And
Yeah.
it's like everything you need is in there. And we did an event together for Sam Parr and Sahil Plume, which I know you
Oh
had
yeah,
on the
yeah, I was
pod.
at that one. Yeah.
Yeah, they tweeted out, they're like, who wants to do an event for us? And like me and Nick, I think, messaged him, and you know, we got to do it with him. He introduced the idea of volunteers to me, which I think are probably the single best mechanism I've had in my events, because volunteers help people feel welcome as they arrive. You know, the first thing as a solo attendee, and I faced this many times, as you go into a venue, if it's a large venue, it's awkward. There's like an awkward like 10 minutes where you don't really speak with anyone, you don't know anyone, you don't know what's going on. And so a warm smile and like a handshake from someone who looks friendly really will change how you perceive that moment and how you you know, what you do in the next few minutes after that single moment. So all my events now have volunteers except for the Junto Club that you went to. Those are like smaller, so I don't have volunteers there. But he has been very influential, and he has a truly he has a deep passion for the space, and he's not just doing it for money. He truly loves the space. So I admire him a lot, and he's probably been one of the most helpful people that I've had in my network.
No, that's really cool. That's really cool. And I'm sure some of the people that you've met must have been really cool to work with. You know what? Actually, let's touch on that quickly. The Sampar and Sahil Bloom event. We had Sahil on the pod.
Yeah.
Great guy, like super humble, really talented. What was even like your experience like working with them? Like, how was it?
It was a good experience. You know, we had a group chat. I don't think we actually chatted live or in person.
Yeah.
The 3 weeks leading to the event, we just planned the whole thing through a group chat.
Yeah.
There's another guy, I'll give him credit, like Tops. He was also involved, so it was us five. But yeah, the whole thing was done through group chat. We made a few like mistakes. We got the location wrong one time, but it was a fun experience. We had like hundreds of people show up, and people had fun. And overall, good experience.
Yeah.
But I think for people who are not in the events world, it's like a lot, you know, to show up at a venue and have like 1,000 people there who are waiting for you.
Yeah.
That is a super overwhelming moment. And I don't know how Sam and Sahil felt. They're like they're great presenters, and they're used to having a huge audience. But if I was them, I would have been like, damn, all these people are here for me. That's kind of cool. It'd make me a little bit nervous, but you know, they crushed it. They gave a speech, and the event, it went really well.
Yeah. I've seen that at your events as well. I always think I'm like that. Maybe it's because of the way that my personality is. I'm like, that must be exhausting at a certain point, because everyone comes for the event, but then you're like the common thread, right, between everyone. So everyone that's there, like even when we went to Junto Club, everyone knows you. So even when you talk about like the first 10 minutes, like the awkwardness, it's like, oh, I know that guy. Like, he's the reason I'm here. So you must just be like, it's like you're constantly just getting like pulled and like in different conversations. And what is the other side of doing events? Like you mentioned obviously all the things that you love about it, like the connections, the impact that you're able to have, even like the surreal moments of just seeing all these people like connect to something that you put together. What is the stuff which is like more difficult about it?
Yeah, it's a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when shit always goes wrong last minute, and so those are really stressful. I did one event on a Friday. It was the New York Tech Week after party, and there were like 2,000 people there. And I was basically like running the club for the first 3 hours, which sounds like dope. Sounds like he was running the club, but it was not fun because I had to put out fires, not literally, but I had to like do a bunch of operational things. I had to help sell at the VIP booths, which was not fun. I had to deal with like drunk people. I had to deal with lines. There was like a 40-minute line. I had to deal with that because I don't want people waiting in line.
Yeah.
And so that shit is like the worst part about events, like the actual operations of it. And I couldn't even enjoy that party until like 2 a.m. when like it was like calmed down. But I would say the other thing is like exactly what you mentioned before, which is when I show up, a lot of people like, and I hope this comes off in a more humble manner, but a lot of people like try to talk to me.
Mm.
But that's not the purpose of the event. The purpose of the event is for them to connect with each other. And yeah, people will still like pitch me stuff and try to sell me stuff. And that's really draining. So I've started, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've started wearing like, I don't wear a name tag. I wear like, I'm very like low key in the shadows at the big events. So I don't get like bothered.
Yeah.
That's probably something I need to figure out or get used to, or just do a better job of acting, on the spot.
Yeah. Yeah. You have I remember at university I was part of this thing called Warwick Africa Summit, which like my university, like a 2-day conference. And we planned this thing for like months. And we got like speakers from Africa to like fly in for it and all this stuff. And we have like the headline speaker, right? I think it was like the vice president of Kenya.
Wow.
Yeah, like one of the students was like knew his family or something. And the event starts on Saturday, and I think on Thursday, and you have to think like we've sold tickets and like he's headlined the whole thing. Like we sold tickets off the back of like this person is coming.
Yeah.
And then like I think it's like Thursday night, he ain't coming anymore. Like it's over. Like
that's tough. Yeah, that's really tough, dude.
Yeah. And like, what are you gonna say to like the vice president of like? There's nothing to say really. You have any like just crazy stories of like just last minute shit just didn't work out and like you've had to pivot?
Yeah.
Anything come to mind?
Nothing like that. I never had the VP of Kenya.
My first and only event.
Yeah, that would scar me for life. I've been like, I'm done with events from that point on. Let me think. I've had a few bar owners last minute as in like 1 minute before the event starts, change their mind and like charge me like double.
Yeah.
And they're like, like we realize we should be doing this amount. And I don't like signing stuff.
Okay.
So like I'm just like, I'm actually like not organized at all. I don't like sign stuff. I don't want to sign a contract or anything.
Yeah.
And then last minute they'll be like, listen, like, the opportunity cost of tonight is too high. It's going to cost like this amount, like double. And I was like, that just ruined my entire night.
Yeah.
So now I'm just thinking about how much money I lost.
Wait, so you just pay for that out of pocket?
Some of them, yeah. Some of them, I always put my card down at all the events because you have to hit min spend.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I hope people drink enough. But I'm also not going to like, I'm never like drink more.
You've never mentioned that. Yeah.
I've never said
said that.
And then sometimes some of my events are sponsored and they will like cover some of the cost. But most of it, I would say when I was starting out, like I spent a lot of money. And then now it's like I mostly break even.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I get free drinks, or most of the time I get free drinks.
Yeah.
So it gives me a bit of like buffer. But that stuff, like, yeah, that was one party that happened pretty recently and it really pissed me off. And it's ruined my night.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I can see how. If my card was there, I'd be like, yeah. Sorry, people, but the event ain't happening anymore.
Everyone get out.
Yeah. It's my card on the tab. Like, I ain't doing this. Okay, sweet. You know, actually, I thought it was really interesting when you mentioned like the first 10 minutes of an event from the perspective of someone that's going to the event, right? Because I know I've definitely felt that where, you're going about your life, like maybe it's like an event that's after work. You're walking to this event, you walk in, you see a bunch of people. A lot of the times they're already talking, like they're already in their own groups. And there's like this awkwardness that suddenly hits you where you're like, I don't know, it's almost like you're back at school and like everyone's talking and you ain't got a table to sit at for lunch. You're like, oh, who the fuck do I go up to and like insert myself into this thing? How can people like do better in the first 10 minutes of an event?
Yeah. Go to the line. Go to the highest traffic area you can find and just put yourself there. And you will meet a friend. And so at any event, that's like usually the beverage line. It's like the name tag station. It's maybe there's like an actual line for the event, which is like the good part of having a line. It's like people apparently at my events, like people like meet each other in line, which is great. But find the most high traffic area and just plant yourself there. And like make eye contact with people and try to start a conversation. The other thing is like volunteer at an event. I think not every event has volunteer opportunities, but mine always do. So you can always volunteer in mine. Or like get there early and speak with the host and ask the host for an introduction.
Mm. You know what? And I think it's an interesting point, and I love that point actually of just like find a line,
Yeah.
because there's always a line somewhere. Like just
Yeah.
find a line. Because usually I'm just standing around. I'm like, oh god damn it, I
Yeah.
have to do this thing, man. But you have a lot of people, obviously, like when they come to your events, they come and talk to you, obviously, and they're like pitching something, or maybe it's even just like a casual conversation. From all of your experience, I'm sure you must have met like thousands of people doing this at this point. When you meet someone, what makes someone like stand out? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people that would they'd want to be cool with you, or
Yeah.
like have some sort of like friendship or something, or even just a connection, like moving past that event. From your perspective, if you had to think of the people that you were like you spoke to and you're like, oh, this person's actually cool, like I would actually hang out with them,
Mm-hmm.
or like do business with them, whatever, what makes someone stand out?
Yeah, I'd say there's like two categories of people. So one is like exactly what you said, which is
Yeah.
like someone is like really chill, really just a great presence, and they provide value not by like selling themselves or like being trying to prove themselves. They're instead providing value by being present, being kind, giving acceptance, giving attention to you, giving approval to you, which is like the three things people need, and just having a really great interaction with you where you leave and you're like, damn, I loved speaking to that person. Speak to them for hours. And maybe that's charisma, maybe that's reverse charisma. I don't really know what it is, but there's something there that most people can sort of develop a skill on, and then follow up. It's all about the follow up. The second category of person, and maybe this is like more specific to me, but really eccentric people, like really unique and interesting people that don't subscribe to like normal like norms and don't care about like things that most people care about.
Yeah.
Yeah, just really strange, interesting people, and I say that in the most positive way I can. And they'll just be stuck in my head, and
Yeah.
I'll be like, I have to like figure that person out. I
Yeah.
have to like contact them and
Yeah.
figure out what's going on and like what they're working on and how they think about the world.
Yeah.
But it's mostly the first category because like people in the second category will like maybe they can be rude and so like the first, if you're trying to stand out in an event, do the first option and then follow up.
Yeah.
Is my tip.
Yeah. You know, on the second category, I almost feel like that's something that's like it's hard to listen to and then be able to like implement that. I feel like you're just like that. Like certain people you meet, and it's weird. Sometimes I won't even have to talk to someone to like see that they're like just eccentric and different. Like you just kind of look at them, you're like, yeah, that cat's a bit different. Like he just got some interesting things going on.
Right.
But yeah, no, I think definitely the first thing is something that anyone can do. Is
Good
like,
advice. Yeah, better advice than the second one.
just be eccentric. Yeah, for sure. What about on the other end? Like no-goes. Like if someone was listening to this, it's like, okay, I've done tons of events. If you go to a networking event, like please do not do these things.
Yeah.
Like what are these things?
Yeah, the first is it's more like table stakes. It's like just don't be like rude, don't be disrespectful. Those are just like you're out of my world forever.
Yeah.
I had this guy in San Francisco. I did an event there, and he like marches up to me, and this was when I worked for Facebook. He was like, "Why did you ban my account?" And I was like, "What? I was like, are you kidding me?" And I'm like running an event, and he throughout the night keeps coming to me, and this is like the worst experience. I'm like, I recognize his face, I still remember it. I'm like, you're gone from all my events.
Yeah. Stood out in the wrong way.
He stood out. Yeah. I would say the more subtle example or the more subtle tip is don't be overly transactional. And I think a lot of people think that someone might respect the fact that they're so direct and maybe ambitious and to the point. But if you go to an event and all you're looking for is a job and you're very clear about that, nobody's going to want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Or you're just looking for money, for investments. I had a few examples of people I've met that have been like that. Like where can I find the investors? I'm just this is my one goal. I don't want to meet anyone else. I don't care about anyone else in this room. I only care about the one outcome I want to drive, which is I need money for my startup.
Mm.
And that's like, that's fair, right? But it's also kind of a buzzkill. So
Mm.
I think you need to add a layer on top of that. Just be like a nice, kind person, and like have a conversation and like play the game a little bit, and just don't be that direct.
Yeah. You know what I say? I say it's like be a cool person first.
Yeah.
And it's weird because, or it's not weird, but it's interesting. Like even working, because I started off in consulting, I then worked at a startup. I'm now trying to build my own thing 100% of the time. And the one thing, if I think about the hiring, in like the consulting world, which was more corporate, and then the same in the startup world, or even like now with the podcast, like getting guests, the one thing that is common is like just be a cool person. Like that's what it starts with.
Yeah.
Is like, can I like hang out with this guy? I remember in consulting they called it like the flight test.
Yeah.
Like, can I go to an airport and like sit next to this guy on a plane and not be like, what the fuck have I just done? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Great point.
and it's cool. Like when you just focus on being a cool person and like having interesting things that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the other things happen naturally. So like if your motive is that you're looking for a job, a lot of the times like those things are actually going to kind of happen naturally,
Mm-hmm.
because people are going to be like, I love hanging out with him or her, and he or she, like, she's talented as well. And now it's like you're kind of stacking things on top of each other. It's like you kind of want to get things to the point where it's like a no-brainer. It's like, wait, I love hanging out with this person. They're good at what they do. Like this is a no-brainer that I would hire them. This is a no-brainer that I would invest in their company, or I would meet them for coffee or come on their podcast. And I think that's my thing that I've found. And I remember even in university, like I always found the term networking like kind of weird, because it implies the motive. Like it implies like I'm like only meeting people to get something. And I think I think a lot of people are trying to network. And I think the people that are really the best that I've seen or interacted with, they're not networking. They're just being cool.
Being cool. They're building like long-term relationships. And I
Yeah.
think they're thinking from a lens of like decades,
Mm.
not like, if you go to an event and you're just looking for a job, like you're thinking from the perspective of like 3-4 months, versus like thinking in decades. So I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. And I think it's also just the energy is different. You can feel the energy when someone doesn't need like anything from you. And I think we're all kind of looking for like authentic experiences, like genuine experiences. And that's kind of how you create that. The authenticity is like, this person doesn't need anything. It's like we're literally, only reason we're connecting is because we both like being in each other's like presence. Yeah, no, like I think it's a good point. I want to talk about the cities. I remember even in your bio, you mentioned that there's like, you're doing events in 5 cities. You've obviously lived in a bunch of cities, traveled to a bunch of cities, hosted events in a bunch of cities. I'm curious, what is the best city to host an event?
It's obviously New York. It's obviously New York.
Why?
But New York, I have the biggest network of like sponsors, partners, and venues here, where I can like make the event really good from a people curation perspective, but also from like an event production perspective. In terms of like some of the differences between the cities, so when people sign up to an event, at least the big ones, I have a form, and I'm like, why are you attending? Like, what's the intention? And the reason I do that is so I can like later try to like curate a little bit and try to help. In New York, I think it was like close to 50% or above 50%, where people come looking to make new friends, or they come just for fun. In San Francisco, that number was like significantly lower. I think it was like 20 to 30%. Most people come looking for investors, which is interesting. Like everyone that came, and it's a really small sample size. San Francisco was like 1,000 to 1,500 emails. New York is much bigger. It's like 15,000 emails. But like most of the people that came to my event in San Fran were like builders who like just needed funding. And that definitely like threw off the vibe of the event. I think New York is unique in the sense that people come and they're everything we talked about. They're like cool, they're kind, they're generous, they're they're present, but they're also like super ambitious. So it's always like rapport. and relationship first, and then business also happens, but not in that very moment.
Mm. That is a cool way to. That's such an interesting that's just an interesting data point as well. Like people in New York, they're kind of more coming for like the fun and like the
Yeah.
actual.
I was surprised,
Yeah.
super surprised. Yeah, I think it was like 56% or something. The last party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. That's cool. What about Toronto? What would you
Yeah.
say about like what's kind of the vibe there?
Toronto is so New York is a place where there's an event every night, and
Mm.
it's almost like overly saturated. Toronto's not like that. There's like not that much going on. It's like a
Mm.
really dope city. I spent 7 years there, and the people there are really great,
Mm.
but there aren't that many events. So when you do one there, everyone's like, "Wow, we have to go."
Yeah.
So it's almost like attracts like a different crowd, different vibe. People who are there are like very grateful that there's an event happening,
Mm.
and they put on like, they are, and I see this in New York as well, but they're their best self. They're the best,
Mm.
most generous, um, best self.
Mm.
And then there's a different energy when people are truly present. Other than that, the demographics are pretty similar to New York City, which is people come sort of just for fun and to make friends.
Yeah. Is there it's interesting like the differences between the cities. And I would say even with New York, obviously I've never thrown an event here, but just living here, New York is a very unique place in like I've been to different cities, but none has such a like a distinctive energy to New York. And it's even funny when like I'll have like friends from London that come here, and I can tell for the first few days they're here, they're almost like confused.
Yeah.
Like the place like kind of throws you off. Like
Yeah.
you're like, what the like there's just so much like random stuff happening, and there's such like a mix of people. You're like, what in the world is happening? It's a very unique place to be.
Yeah.
Um,
For sure. It's the way I see it is like, everyone comes here for one reason, and it's like, again, kind of corny, but it's like to chase their ambitions and their dreams. Like nobody came here to like chill.
yeah.
Nobody came here to like retire or anything. People came here to like grind and work
Yeah.
hard. So that itself produces a different level of energy.
Yeah. You know what it is as well? Like the city doesn't let you chill.
Yeah, you can't chill.
Like if you literally have nothing to do, it's like hard to be here. Like it's genuinely
It's
like
hard to chill.
difficult.
It's interesting you say that. One of my mentors, he used to live in like Thailand for like 20, 30 years. And he was like, there, it's like, it's hard to grind. Like the default is chill. And he just moved here for a job. And he's like, it's hard to chill in New York. I find it really hard to relax.
Yeah.
I'm always on. And I never thought about it that way, but it's true. I'm never like not doing anything.
Yeah. No, 100%. Like if I need to chill, I'm like, I leave. Like I need to go somewhere else. Like I
That's
can't.
a good tweet. If I need to chill, I leave.
Yeah. I just bounce. What is there a city in your mind that you're like, I need to host an event there?
Ooh. I don't know. I think like traveling and like throwing, like I mentioned this before, but like when you travel and you do an event there, it's a really nice warm start to meeting people and then like to meeting the community there.
Yeah.
So there are places that I want to like travel to, and I'm curious to what the energy is like, and so I would do an event. But I don't think there's a place where I'm like itching to throw an event. But in the first category, those places like I love Berlin, and I feel like there's like a thriving tech scene. There's also like a crazy like party scene.
Yeah, I've heard of
Like,
that.
it's like crazy. So that's a place that comes to mind, or like Budapest, maybe like Tokyo. But I'm literally
Tokyo would be cool.
I don't even know how I would do an event in Tokyo. Like I don't. It's so out of like my comfort zone in terms of like how do you find a venue, like what's the culture there.
Yeah.
So maybe that's like this is like level 6 and that's like level 10. I don't know.
Yeah. You know what? You should do an event in like, I don't know, a Tokyo, Berlin. And you should also like, it would just be cool to see like the behind the scenes
Yeah.
and it'd be cool to see how you just take it from like 0 to 1. Like seeing that the actual event, and like you could put the footage in from like the actual event, and then just seeing like where you started, I don't know, like on the phone, like just calling some random people, like putting your card down or whatever.
Yeah, it's like the Fire Festival
Yeah.
documentary.
Basically.
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't turn out like the Fire Festival, but yeah. That's a good way to put it, yeah. Sick. Okay. So I feel like there's gonna be a few people that listen to this and they're like, I want to start doing events.
Yeah, for sure.
Even what you
I hope
said,
so.
yeah, like even what you said around like, it's a cool way to introduce yourself to like a new community, to like go somewhere new and you like do events and you can instantly start meeting people. I know if I was going to think about doing an event, I would have two things would come to mind. Like, am I the right person? Like, can I curate the right vibe? Like, how do I make the experience good? And then the second thing would be like, how do I get people to show up? Can you kind of take those like two insecurities away? Like, how, first of all, like when you're thinking about the experience, like what are some of the first things that you're thinking about, and like working through in your mind so it's actually like something beneficial to people? Like what comes to mind first?
I think the easy thing about New York is that people always want to go out. People are itching to do cool stuff.
Yeah.
And with every event, you need like an anchor, which is sometimes it's like the people, like the vice president of Kenya, like maybe that's the anchor. Or usually mine, when I started off, it was like a rooftop, like a really dope rooftop. Like I'm doing this event on the 23rd. It's like a penthouse.
Yeah.
So like a really
I saw
cool
that, yeah.
venue where people are like, I definitely want to be there because I live in New York for a reason, and it's to do cool things like that. Or it's like a type of person, or it's like a context. So that's the first thing. You have to figure out your anchor. I think your second part was like, how do you get people to show up? It depends on like the scale of the event. If it's like 50 people, you could probably like email everyone, and there are mechanisms that you can incorporate to sort of like de-risk your attendance. But I would assume with any event, like for the average person, like at least like 20% of your RSVPs would show up. I think where it gets really tricky is when people like purely do it because they want to make money. And like, I had someone in my network who was trying to do an event, and like she booked out a venue, put her cart down, and then try to sell tickets to cover the cost of the venue. And like, no one's going to pay $20 to go to an event, a random event. They don't,
Someone they don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, just figuring out that part. But also using like the 20% as a baseline.
Yeah.
Anyone you invite, 20% will show up.
Yeah. Have you thought about, or have you even ever done like ticketed, like paid for events?
Never done a ticketed event. I don't like charging people.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I just don't like doing it. It's never.
Yeah.
Also, I don't ever seeing it being like an actual business. I did an Equinox spin class last Friday.
Yeah.
And I charged people $20, but I gave it back.
Yeah.
It's a deposit. And even the people who canceled, I gave it back. I'm like way too nice.
Yeah. Like I'm too nice for this shit.
I'm way too nice. Maybe I'm in the wrong business, dude.
Yeah, that's funny. Cool. Okay, one two more things I want to touch on. Cool. You mentioned when you were talking about how people can do, like, you're going to networking events, you're trying to meet people, how they can do it correctly. And one of the things you spoke about was like that the best people get right is not only the initial interaction and just having like an authentic vibe and just being cool, it's also the follow-up. The people, because I think the follow-up is like, the follow-up is a spot where it can immediately become transactional.
Yeah.
And I would just be curious from your perspective, like, how does someone do the follow-up correctly? Or who are the people that you've seen who have done the follow-up correctly? Like, what is it they're getting right?
It's really hard. You're right. It's like it's an art, and it's hard to teach. But a few things come to mind, which is the first one is like, if we met at an event and we vibe and we do vibe, and I get your Instagram, whatever, then that's just like natural. So that's the first one. Focus on being authentic and like just like a nice person to speak with. The second thing is in the conversation, there are a few things I like to dig out, and I mentioned this in the beginning. One of them is like, what are your goals? And I say that in a more organic way. It's not the first thing I say. I'm like, what are your New Year's resolutions?
It's like an interview as well.
Yeah. I actually did that at a party, and like I said it to a girl, and she was like, "What is wrong with you?" I was like, "What are your New Year's resolutions?" I don't know why I said that. But yeah, I try to figure out, I try to read someone and try to figure out in the first like 5 minutes, like what are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Why are you here? What are you struggling with?
Mm,
And then once I have those pieces of information, I have your contact information, and then I can follow up after with value.
mm,
Because now I know I can send you like a book, I can send you a resource,
mm,
I can introduce you to someone. That's like immediate value, and I think that's what most people don't do. Whether it's an IRL interaction or it's like a Zoom call, it's they leave the call and they have nothing to work with.
mm,
They can't continue to thread, but just in the last 5 minutes, ask them like what how not how can I help. Some people do that, but it can come off as transactional. It's like this
mm.
person is obviously trying to build something with me, but instead, like just ask them about their goals, their challenges, and then internalize that. Think about it, dig up some stuff to help them out, and then that's your follow up.
Yeah. Is all of this like mental? Like when you're speaking with them, is it you're literally just remembering these details, or like after the conversation, are you like writing down notes of like I'm kind of interested to get like the process behind it, or is it
Yeah.
literally just like you got this person's Instagram and you just remember like, oh yeah, they mentioned this in the conversation, like maybe when I follow up I'll just
Yeah, the best, most productive conversations, most energizing conversations I've had, I always left. I always leave with like writing a few things down, and I always
mm,
send them a doc. Like I had a conversation with this director today at Google, and we were just like jamming, and I'm like, we should do this, this, this. Like, here's what you're working on. Here's how I can help, and then I followed up with a Google Doc.
mm,
I'm like, and I think we'll probably at some point have an interaction like that, or maybe we already did. It's like,
yeah,
here are some things we got to do, and you were like, I got to put you in the pod.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I got to introduce you to like Rachel, all these different things.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, those are the best conversations when you leave, when you have like a ton of notes. But yeah, you got to write it down. I
yeah,
don't know. You seem to have really good memory because
yeah,
you ran this whole session, like no notes or anything. I'm like, wow. So maybe you don't need it, but I definitely need it.
yeah. No, that's good, and I kind of like it because it's almost I have this thing in my mind. If you're being really a big word for me is like authenticity,
Yeah.
and being genuine. And if you're doing it, you shouldn't actually have. It's kind of weird if you're having like. Not every conversation is going to be amazing. There's going
Yeah.
to be certain people that you click with. I remember I even wrote this on Twitter. I was like, if you're being authentic, you'll almost be a bit naturally polarizing. There'll be some people that you really get on with,
Yeah.
and then there'll be. I'm not saying it needs to be like a confrontation or a conflict, but there'll be some people that you're like, oh, that person is just not for me.
Yeah.
And I like what you said because it's like the people that are for you, it's like the a weird way to say it, but like the action items will be so apparent and so clear.
Mm,
Like it will be obvious what you want to follow up on and what you want to talk
100%.
about next.
Yeah.
And that's also a good way to know like, oh, like I actually just had a really good conversation with this person. The fact that there's like 2 or 3 threads that I actually want to follow up on.
Yeah.
And that's actually a cool way to even frame the follow up is like if you couldn't get anything from this person, would you actually just want to talk to them again?
Mm,
Versus being like, well, I need a job and this person works at Google and I'd love to work
Yeah.
at Google, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
hit them up. Um,
I like that. Yeah.
Ye-
It's almost like the energy of the person.
yeah,
And that happens with a lot of like high performing people doing interesting things. Like I don't know, like you meet someone and you're like impressed, and it's like I don't know how we can like partner on anything, but I just admire energy and I want to be around you, and hopefully you
Mm.
want to be around me as well. I think that's a valid reason to, continue a relationship with someone. For sure.
yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. Let's end on this. I thought it was interesting earlier in the conversation because you're obviously really good at it, like the event stuff. I'm gassing you up way too much.
Appreciate you.
I need to like say like 5 bad things, like, just balance it out. But you're good at this stuff. I thought it was interesting that you said like this isn't like my end goal necessarily. Like there's things that you want to do past events. What makes you say that?
Yeah, I look at my career right now, and I have like there's a few constraints, which is both helpful but also harmful. And one of them is like I'm an immigrant on a visa, so that sort of limits my ability to do a lot of things. Um, so right now, I sort of see, I have my full-time job. I have like a bunch of random things, and then I have the events, which I sort of see as almost like an escape from the full-time job, and it's where I get to like unleash like my creative energy and get to experiment and try new things without like boundaries. Um, I think, and there's going to be a point where, I'm not working like a big tech job anymore, which would also mean something different for the events. And that's like what I said is super abstract, but it's my way of saying, from a personal perspective, the events do it for me right now. Maybe in like 5 years, it's going to serve a different purpose in my life. Maybe full time, probably not. Or maybe someone else takes it over or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have any idea in your mind what it could be? Like, do you think about, and not even just what's next, like, do you even think about like what an endpoint would be or what it would look like?
So the things that fascinate me right now is like, one is the reason I'm trying to build more intention behind the events, which is like the deal flow newsletter, the helping founders get fundraising, is because I want to be helpful. And so that's one route I'm going to continue down, which is like, how do I have impact on other people in a positive way and help people get jobs, founders get money, investors get deal, that sort of thing. I'm going to continue that path. And the way I potentially see it evolving is, Sahil probably says this, Naval says this, but like the idea of leverage and like, media is one. So maybe it turns into like a media thing. Maybe I do what you do. I don't know. That's one path. The other path is I'm fascinated by hospitality, which is like this year I want to do like a concert or a music festival because that stuff it's so cool. And the thing about hospitality is that you get to influence how someone feels when they enter your space, and they leave with memories, which you get to design. And I think that's a really powerful and energizing thing. And then the third path is probably, and maybe I can run these in parallel, but the third one is probably something along the lines of like being able to sort of like elevate startups, because I have admiration for entrepreneurship and people that build companies. So maybe that's like as an investor, I don't really know much about that space, like the investing stuff, to be honest, but maybe there's something there where I can like incubate startups or help them, get money, that sort of thing.
You know what comes to mind? I think some of the best people that we've had on the pod, one thing they do really well, they create optionality in their life. So a lot of the times you're not actually going to know the direct path forward or exactly what you're going to do. And I think when that's the case, it's like, okay, just increase the amount of options that you could have.
Yeah.
And then it's like, the next question is then how do you increase the number of options? And I think it's exactly what you said, which is like, be helpful, like have some value or something that you can like give to the world or you're known for. And even when you talk about like the Sahil and Sam event, it's something special that someone's going to do an event and like someone, and they obviously have like hundreds of thousands of followers between like the different platforms, podcasts, everything that they do. The fact that they would want you to do it, that is creating optionality in itself. Like you're becoming known for something, like people are trusting you with something. There's something that you directly provide value to doing. And I think one thing I like about the podcast is being able to like inspire people through other people's stories. And I even like that aspect to what you're saying, which is like, it's not exactly clear exactly what I'm going to do, but I'm creating optionality and this is how I'm doing it. And I think that's a lesson for everyone, which is like, you don't need to have the whole thing figured out, but just be in the process of like, just creating a few more options, like giving yourself routes, like threads that you could go down. I just think it's a much more manageable way to kind of get to that like ideal life or ideal job or whatever that you want to do.
I love that. Yeah. And I think creating options, and then you probably have like a vague sense, but you have a North Star of where you want to head, which is for you, it seems like it's like, inspiring people through other
Mm.
people's stories, but generally inspiring people. So I think if you have vague sense of direction, and then you pursue that direction with the intention of creating options, then I
Mm.
think you're on the right path.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think a lot about like what's the North Star? I think for me, it's like, I just want people to think they can do anything.
That's cool. Yeah.
And I think the reason it feels like a personal thing for me, because there's been so many moments, and like even growing up and going to school, and I saw it a ton with like my peers, which is like there were certain career paths that they felt they had to go down, or like even once you start working, they feel like they have to work at a job for 2 years, even if they don't like it, because it's like, once I hit the 2 years, then I can leave and do
Yeah.
something else. Like
Yeah.
there's just so many things that we think we have to do,
Right.
and I felt like
Love
that as
that.
well.
Yeah.
And I think that's why for me at this point, I'm like, I want people to like listen to this shit and be like, I can just
Cool.
do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to bring you a bunch of guests that show you can do whatever the
That's
fuck
cool.
you want.
I love that. It's a great way to end, and like help people unleash
Yeah. Oh, I
Unleash,
like
like,
that.
their-
Help people unleash.
their
That
best
is-
version of themselves. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a wrap, man.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure having you on.
That's great. That's dope, dude.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel. We're having fire conversations every week on the podcast. Before we end the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Free Agency. What if I told you there is a good chance you're leaving money on the table in your career? It would kind of annoy you a bit, right? Well, Free Agency aims to stop that. They represent and manage talent in the tech industry. Here's how they do it. First, they provide you with a dedicated talent agent. Think about this as your career quarterback. They understand you and your career goals. Based on that understanding, they bring you suitable interviews at top firms. You focus on smashing the interview, and together with their network, research, negotiation expertise, they will make sure you get a top of market salary. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency.